Hi everybody, today is January 22nd and welcome to the Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Education meeting. We are going to begin with a moment of silence, and I'm just going to turn to Board Member Jody Meyer to speak briefly.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak a little bit about, oh, you all know me and I can't not get emotional here. So about a week ago, we lost a very special member of our community, Anne Marie Gagliardi, who has lived in Hastings for many years with her husband Al and her 3 daughters, Louisa, Serafina, and Christina, all of whom went through the Hastings schools. And her daughter, Christina, is now a teacher of science in the middle school. And for those of you who knew Anne Marie, and for those of you who didn't, she was a really lovely woman who, among other things, she worked in the schools for almost 20 years. She started off here as a part-timer and then soon thereafter became a full-time person, and she worked initially in the Office of Pupil Personnel Services. I think that's what it was called, right? And she worked throughout the years in a variety of different aspects of that office, and in both guidance and special ed. And she was just sort of such a warm and lovely woman. She also had been involved with the PTSA. She was a PTSA past president, so I feel this particular connection to her. I think, I'm sorry?
And a Jenkins Award winner.
Oh, she was, and she received the Jenkins Award from the PTSA for community service. I understand that she also worked for many years with Bill Finkelday at the Rec Center. Donna, if there are other things you want to add in. And are there other things you want to say?
No, you're doing a great job.
Okay, and no, I meant that.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And she was just like a real team player, and someone who had a warmth about her. I could hear her. You could just picture walking into the guidance office, and you open the door and you could just hear her, "Hi, hun." Right? I mean, she had terms of endearment for everybody, and just sort of, it's hard to just imagine that she's not here with us. And I know there was a huge outpouring for her last week, and I think that she's the kind of real Hastings person that we all love and that we'll all miss dearly. And it's very, very hard and sad to say goodbye to somebody, especially so quickly and really so much before the time that she should have been able to be here and watch her daughters and have some grandchildren. So,
why don't we all take a moment of silence? Tony?
Sure. Thank you, Jody, for sharing those words about Anne Marie. I only had the opportunity to interact with her a few times, but I can tell you that the entire school community really felt her loss, and no matter where her name came up within the last week and a half, everyone's reaction was like, "Oh gosh, she was amazing, a hard worker, a straight shooter, and really dedicated to our kids, not just her own kids, but our kids." And so it is most definitely a tremendous loss, and I want to thank our guidance team for really pulling together. Also, Michelle Porter has, as our registrar, but she has really stepped in to help out in the guidance office during this time where there's no one overseeing that aspect of the work, and so we've been very fortunate in that our team has pulled together. On another note, I'm happy to share that Louis DiPietro is doing well. I saw him on Saturday, went to visit him a little bit. I think he was like, "Why are you here? Why are you harassing me?" It's like, I have a budget question. But he's doing well, and he's home, and he's resting. The surgery went well, so I definitely want our community to know that he's recovering, and he's going to have to take it easy so he can get back here in a couple of weeks. So we have a busy couple of weeks coming up here in Hastings. So we have our grade 5 and 6 winter concert. That's actually happening tomorrow night here at the auditorium. We have on Saturday night, January 27th, I highly recommend everyone clears their calendars. It is the Booster Club Casino Night fundraiser. It's supposed to be a pretty awesome night, from what I understand, and so you should have gotten information about that home via email, but there'll probably be more blasts around that coming out. We have, also equally as exciting, a facilities committee meeting happening.
I think that's more exciting.
That's a little more exciting. We're
Much
going to have
more
roulette
fun.
tables there, too. No, 8 a.m. on the 30th. Hillside SEPTA Coffee is coming up on the 31st. Also, on February 1st, we have the Tucker Lecture Series, and that's something that Greg Smith is a part of, and I cannot remember the speaker at this moment off the top of my head, but I know a blast went out about that. We have our high school PTSA liaison meeting coming up on February 5th, which is our next board meeting as well, February 5th. Also, 2 other things to note. The Board of Ed is having a special ed committee meeting this Friday in conjunction with SEPTA. SEPTA's part of the
SEPTA's part of
committee.
the committee.
So we're doing that Friday afternoon at 3:30 or 3:45 or something like that. 3:45. So that's open, I think 3:45, yes, January 26th. So that's important. Also to note, since we're talking about special ed, a couple of things. A blast did go out to our community asking for people, families of children who have gone through the process of being classified and have IEPs to be part of a discussion around the continuum of services to offer us their perspectives. So there are 3 different, there's a Hillside one, a FMS one, and an HHS one. It's on our Facebook page. I posted it there today. SEPTA, I know, blasted it out today, and Janina went out in a separate blast last week from special ed, right, about these dates. So please spread the word if you know. They're coming up like in the next few days. And so that's an important conversation as we look at the continuum of services to best meet the needs of our kids. And that is coming up in the coming weeks as well. And at our next board meeting, Laura and Tesla will be here to give us an update on special ed. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about special ed as well during my highlights and give you a little sense of what's coming in that presentation next board meeting. Okay, so on to the good stuff. But there's all good stuff, but on to some of the really good stuff. We are excited to start by spotlighting one of our high school students here, Hannah Scotch, who is in attendance. Hannah was, as you saw our board saw it internally, and also was blasted out to our community yesterday. Hannah is a semifinalist as part of the Regeneron Science Talent Search. And Hannah, what's your study? What do you?
The title of my project was the secondary transcription factors of low 34 in chemosensory.
You should say it to the mic.
Oh, of course that's what you wrote about.
Sure. You want to come to the mic and
Yeah,
tell
I
us?
think you should come to the
Yeah,
mic.
come to the mic and say that again.
Everybody can
And
hear
when
it.
you say it, maybe say it in like layman's terms. So we can.
Essentially what that means is that I was using C. elegans, which is a freely living microscopic nematode, so it's a type of worm. It's often used as a model organism for humans because it's a lot smaller than humans, but it has a very similar nervous system. And so they have a response to elevated carbon dioxide levels in the environment, and so do we. And if we fail to respond correctly, we asphyxiate, and that is the cause of SIDS. So the research I was doing was looking to find some of the factors that cause this malfunction in the same malfunction in the worms, so that we can better understand that pathway in humans and potentially find a way to avoid SIDS in the future.
Wow. That's awesome.
Thank you so much for that work. It really is awesome.
amazing,
I mean, here
yeah.
you are in high school doing work to help with SIDS. That's just, I wish I could speak more articulately because I can even say the title of your paper. But
Thank you.
But you explained it in a
thank
way that
you.
made sense to us, which says a lot about your skill set. So congratulations, Hannah. We also have Albert, who is here from Regeneron, and he is going to honor Hannah. So Albert, come on down.
Come on down.
You're the next good. You'll be playing Plinko over here.
I just wanted to say quickly, I don't want to take up more time, but
please.
Regeneron has a 10-year commitment to the student talent search, and we're going to commit $100 million over that 10-year period, because that's how strongly we believe on channeling young talent such as Hannah that are dedicated and focused, and they're actually, believe it or not, I mean, you're making a change in the future, whether it be with health, with science, with energy. So, we're all very proud for your hard work. And I know I've heard that even the application process was just several hours within itself. So, great job and keep up the good work. So I'd like to present this certificate. There you go.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Hannah. That is pretty awesome. And Hannah, you can smile for some pictures. Maybe your parents want to get it.
I know.
Nicely done.
Tell them.
Keep smiling.
About the company.
Yeah.
I really think we should invest. Look at this.
And Hannah, I'll also add that, as I say, behind every great kid are some pretty awesome adults. So thank you, Regeneron, for this.
In this case,
And I want to say thank you to your fabulous parents, Sally Baker and Peter Scotch, who is a member of our high school faculty. And thank you very, very much to Melissa Shandroff, who is the head of our science department and our science research teacher. So it is a team effort, and perhaps many kudos to all of you.
Thank you, Albert, for being here and representing Regeneron. And I think it's pretty important to recognize that, Hannah, you're like one of 300 kids in the whole country that are even recognized in this way. It is remarkable and significant. And like Nobel Peace Prize winners have gone, so clearly you're destined for greatness. And I'm sure it's partly genetic, but it's clearly going on there. So congratulations, nicely done. And thank you for coming out tonight to honor Hannah. Thank you, Albert. We also have, I'm excited to share that we had 2 students be recognized in the Community MLK Junior Contest in Hastings. And so they are Rory McKinnon, who is in 2nd grade, she's in 2nd grade, and Benjamin Wool, who's in 3rd grade. Rory did an art project, and Benjamin did an essay contest. So the students went to the breakfast and talked about their piece. So Rory, who's a 2nd grade student, she won for her art submission depicting the peace marches during Martin Luther King Jr.'s time. She chose to draw about the marches as they were such a big part of MLK's life. Also, Ben wrote his essay regarding the topic of how has your life been affected by what happened in the past. He said his essay was based on Hillside's motto that here we are all different, but we swim together. He said we should all be so lucky to be around all different people all the time. And Amy Kazis, who is our principal over at Hillside, she shared that participation in the essay art contest was voluntary, and that the contest allowed the children to express their understanding of MLK in that period of time in a way that resonated with them through words or through art. And the students had a chance to share that opportunity. So we're really excited for both Rory and Benjamin. Additionally, several of our students had their art displayed at the Ocillus Gallery. And congratulations to Ian, Sarah, and Pierce. And also Ian received an award for his photography, and he's the one pictured here. And he looks remarkably like Pearsall, but I don't know. I don't know everyone that well, but I thought that was him. So congratulations to them. We also had Hastings was featured in 2 news pieces. Recently, our 1st graders participated in a peace walk, peace march, and our middle school is doing some work around mindfulness. Also exciting in the middle school last weekend was Godspell, which was the grade 6 musical that happened on Friday night and Saturday night. Lisa and I were both there for Friday night's performance. It was outstanding.
I took your seat.
You took my seat, but it was a good. I think I have a better seat. I got the angle, but it was amazing. Our kids really did such an outstanding performance. It was an hour, so it was like on point time-wise. Everyone can focus the entire time. But the music was great. They put a little spin on it. It had had a modern take on the story. But I think the thing that really stood out to me was how moving it was. After leaving and the audience was kind of just congregating and waiting for their kids, there were many people in tears, and in the most not tears, not in a really positive way, and it was great, and the kids just did an outstanding job, and for a 12-year-old, 11-year-old to get up there and sing your heart out and dance and move, and it was amazing. It was really, really well done. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I felt the same way. First of all, I have to say the talent pool was very, very deep.
No joke.
There were a lot of solos, and they were all fabulous. And I think I was also touching on some of the same things that you did. There was there was just a joy coming from the
Yes,
stage.
yeah.
I mean, they were also dressed very colorfully, very 1960s, but you could tell the kids just wanted to be on the stage doing what they were doing, and they just took in the whole audience with it. It was wonderful.
It was great. And so we have other musicals. I believe the 5th grade is going to be doing, oh gosh, I'm blanking now, but they're doing their musical as well.
It's
It's
Spoonful of Sugar.
Yes, Mary Poppins. And then the high school just announced that they're doing Into the Woods for their musical for the spring. So they are going to start auditions for that as well. So we have some great performances coming up in the coming weeks as well. As part of my update, I did want to take a moment to just share with our community and with our board a little bit about special ed. As you know, that as I mentioned on February 5th, Tesfa and Laura will be here, and they're going to be giving us an update as to the action plan and the 6 major recommendations that were made during the audit, right? And so they're going to talk to us about their progress. So one of the things I wanted to share with you, I met with them recently. They are focused on working on the SOPM, which is Standard Operating Procedures Manual. And so that manual is really going to kind of serve as the anchor for the work moving forward. They have shared a timeline with me, giving me a sense of what that looks like. So in its entirety, because I think we're envisioning like a digitized version of the SOPM so that it can be updated, so that it can iterate as the needs evolve in our community. So we're not looking at just some book that's going to sit on a shelf, but that's really going to inform our practice. And SEPTA has really been, SEPTA leadership and SEPTA membership has really been partnering with us and with Laura and Tesfa on this work. And they're looking at different components. So, you know, right now, for example, they're working on policies and processes. They've done some focus group work. They're looking at forms that they want to embed. Like we recently had a great conversation around developing a form for when we're considering a child needing support in terms of an aid. So what is a process that we're going to go through to determine if a child needs, you know, a shared aid or a one-on-one aid or no aid. And so that was something that had not been in place. And so they're developing sort of inventory that you would go through to consider whether a child would be eligible for that. They're also looking at the continuum of services, and so as I mentioned, that's coming up over the next week or so, and we're going to have focus groups. And I didn't remember the dates. I don't know. It's fine. No pressure if you remember the date.
So February 1st,
Yes.
there's a program in the morning and a program in the evening.
Oh, I have it here.
To give an overview.
K through 12.
Yeah. But prior to that, there's like opportunities for parents to come in and offer
That's
input, right?
And there's 3 different opportunities. One at Hillside, one at the middle school, one at the high school, where it's more of a parents offer feedback.
Yes, sort of like what's missing, or you know, what do we need that we don't have, and kind of look at how that you know falls into play. So that's where they are with that process. I also wanted to share, and so there's a lot of there's an attempt to engage a community. Our special ed department also recently blasted an update as to what's going on. They're also working with focus groups around this continuum. Recently they talked about the referral process. They're also going to be doing a parent training workshop for parent training, so parents who are part of the process or sit in a classification process have an understanding of that. And finally, I wanted to share with you some of the specific professional development that we're doing for our teachers, our special education teachers. One is, as part of the work that Gravity is doing over at Hillside, there is dedicated time for just the special education teachers. It's been going on from the beginning of the year. I had not fully understood that prior to a conversation I had with Amy and Laura. There is dedicated time built into the schedule when, you know, Gravity is there, and she is working with our special education teachers. In addition to that, we have training and coaching from our ICT specialist who comes in. I know Jennifer over at Hillside. I'm not quite sure the name of the person who comes here to Farragut, but they work, and in high school, sorry, they come and they work with our teachers who are in the co-teaching program and offer strategies and coaching around that work. So just a little bit of an update for what's going on in special ed. You'll get a much more in-depth discussion on the 5th. I would say that my inclination is to have it be more of a discussion kind of thing as opposed to a formal like 8,000 slides. So somewhat similar to what we did at Hillside a couple months ago with the ELA piece. I think obviously there'll be information shared. I think it'll be a productive opportunity if you all also can ask questions. So our next meeting will have that. Our next meeting will also have the preliminary review of the non-instructional components of the budget. So we'll figure out the structure of that. That is more presentation-y. That's non-instructional stuff. So that is also happening on February 5th. Just mark your calendars.
When is Dr. Katzman coming?
I don't remember what date Dr. Katzman. She's not coming February 5th.
Okay.
That I know.
February was sticking in my mind, that's why I wondered.
She's not, no.
But that may be our only February meeting?
It is our only February meeting. And I know she's coming. They have been working on also looking at if she can do some PD with our staff as well as not our teachers, our leadership team. So there's a lot going on there. So that's my update from special ed, which I'm sorry was not on there. And we don't have a student here tonight because they are in the midst of midterms and regents, and so
They're doing what they need to do.
they need to study. No options there.
Are you done with?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda is public comment. So if anybody has a comment, please come to the microphone. You don't have to state your address, but just state if you're a resident of Hastings.
Nina Siegel Kennedy. Haven't been here for a few months. Thank you, Tony, for the update on special ed. And I think a few of us are here tonight because we know that it'll be a really full room on the 5th of February, and we wanted to maybe provide a little bit of context prior to that and what we as parents have experienced, and to share some thoughts so that maybe it changes or helps you think about some of the questions to ask prior or during the meeting. Certainly, we know that the special ed office has changed for the better drastically since the lawsuit and since the arrival of Laura and Tony and Tefsa, and we are thrilled with all three of them. I would say, however, that the broader culture shift that has not necessarily occurred equally, and in my view, with talking with parents across all three schools. And I just wanted to remind the BOE as plaintiffs in the lawsuit that I do believe there will be an accountability issue for everyone here in this room. I think that an IEP is a legal document, and I can tell you that specifically in my case, it's not legally being complied with. And when I believe supervisors of teachers aren't requiring or helping or enabling or ensuring that teachers meet those basic standards, I think that it puts into question all of what Tony and Lisa and Tefsa are working so hard to change. For me, this draws into question the engagement of the building level, and obviously I can only speak to the building that my child is in. So right now I would say I have to couch my marks with specificity to the middle school. I wanted to read to you my son's first IEP goal, which says, with minimal support, the student will maintain organization of school materials, including locker and desk areas, through monthly recorded observations and scheduled weekly meetings. When I got my son's progress report just a month ago, there was received no communication from teachers about that, and there was a one-line sentence that said, the student has not made progress toward this goal at all due to the parental request that the student not access this service or program. In actuality, I never, nor my husband, requested that Reed not access the service or program. What we did do is request that he be taken out of resource room, which is one way potentially to meet the goal, and that was because on the first day he was given a math assessment, despite the fact that he has the only one of my three kids who got a 4 on the state math test and has no math goals. So Tony's very aware of this, as is Laura. And I thought I would bring you actually a visual prop of the notebook.
Nina,
Yes.
sorry, we just have to stop you for one moment.
Yeah, and
It's 2 minutes?
No, well, the 2 minutes too. Just being mindful of how much is specific to your child.
Okay.
And a little more broader
Okay.
of a focus.
No, I really appreciate that. I think the issue of handouts and the lack of customization. And I would say this is certainly endemic of both children. And I think more broadly, some of the other experience that's happening in the ICT class. I also wanted to mention that recently there were some questions about modifications of paperwork and test reviews and whether teachers had the skills across the ICT classroom to get that done. And we know that money is being funneled into the schools for professional development. We're really supportive of that. And beyond that, and we're wondering, are all the teachers accessing that professional development? I'm wondering if it's optional or if it's mandatory, and whether there are any observations going on into the class. And we know that there's been a lot of discussion from previous BOE minutes about funding for a hockey team, for an additional bus at Hillside so students can bring instruments. But we want to really make sure as well that funding is being allocated for things like a revision of resource room and tiered instruction as mandated by the federal lawsuit. So I would say the three questions I would hope that you would ask next week are, what's the progress for RTI in the middle school as identified by the audit, and the continuation and continuum of services, and what's the time frame for that in the middle school. 2, question about whether the coaching is optional or mandatory, and what's being done with observations in the ICT classroom. And then maybe 3rd and most importantly, and hopefully this has already happened, but are Tony and Tefsa and Laura all specifically being asked what they specifically need from you as a board and where the obstacles are. And I think creating a safe space for that very candid discussion would be something that we would really value. Thanks.
Thank you, Nina. Any more public comment?
Hello, good evening. I'm Mia Johnson. I wrote my notes before Tony spoke, so I'm sorry. I'm trying to revamp a little bit. I apologize if some of this seems a little out of context or no longer completely relevant, but I am really happy to hear the update tonight, because I think since the August board meeting with the Board of Ed approved the recommendations in the audit, I don't think I've heard, I haven't heard a lot of discussion about special education at the Board of Ed level. And so I'm really happy about the meeting that's coming up. And I'm encouraged to see the board's level of engagement in special education in our district. I really don't want to see or feel like special education once again is being pushed to the side and not a priority for the district. You know, I worry about, as Nina mentioned, the district being in compliance with its obligations under the settlement agreement. Primarily, I worry as a parent of a child with special needs, my son's educational experience, day-to-day educational experience, depends on the strength and health and vitality, not only of the special education department, because obviously special education, but the entire general education, the entire educational experience in our district. And the need for, as was said much more eloquently in the report, the integration of special education and general education, for it to be collaborative and cohesive, for special education is not siloed, not a destination. So we need to understand that leadership across the board is talking and listening and collaborating, and that you all are asking the right questions, providing the resources, whatever leadership you can do for Tony and Laura and Lou and Gail and Amy, so that the recommendations that you all approved are actually implemented. I would ask if you are, and you don't know, I guess we don't know how the action plan is fully being implemented, so I wonder, sort of a silly question, but are you happy with how it's going? It feels like, you know, we all talked in this room in August, And certainly things have happened. I mean, Tessa's hire was a huge accomplishment, and there has been increased professional development that I'm aware of, and certainly communications. But as far as the multi-tiered support systems, RTI, all the other stuff in the report, are you pleased with how that is being implemented? Gosh, and if you aren't, I hope that you'll ask the questions. You'll, questions like, are the key leaders asking? Are the key leaders, the key players, talking to each other? Are they collaborating? Are they working towards a common goal and purpose? Do they have the resources they need? What are the roadblocks? Because I would say time's basically run out for a lot of these kids. Like, they're kids who are in 3rd grade who can't read. So how much more time are we going to take? And there are kids in high school that aren't prepared for college. And so for those kids and those families, we should just assume, like, everything is important. Everything's a priority. Time has run out. So I hope that anything that you can do in your position as leaders of the district, that you will put your full efforts behind. And obviously, SEPTA and special education families remain ready and willing to be to partner and participate and to show up and to call out. But I just time is no longer ticking. Time has run out.
I can respond to some of it, and thank you for your comment. And I think it's great to hear this before we do have our presentation, actually before we have our Board of Ed special education meeting, and before we have the presentation from Laura and Tessa. So far as the board's role regarding special ed this year, we were involved, I'm going to say probably over the summer, when it turned out there were, I think it was about 3 or close to 3 positions that hadn't been budgeted for, and it was up to us to decide whether to fund them, and we said, yes, we have to fund them. Since then, we haven't really been involved, which is why in December we asked for a meeting, because we started to hear concerns about, are things moving, are they going quickly enough? And the only way we can find out is by sitting down with the special ed.
Right.
So in early December we asked for the meeting to get everybody, you're part of the chain. It takes a while. So the answer, when you asked, are we happy with how the audit is going, I think we're going to have a better answer after that meeting, because we're going to be asking those questions. And also we've asked our attorneys to look at the audit, because I want us all to understand, we are required to vote, I think it's in June or May, about whether we think everything's been met. And I wanted, our attorneys are going to prepare a framework on what needs to be met, and that can, I think, help guide that discussion on Friday. So then we can say, how happy are we? So we'll have that framework. So I guess this is a long way of saying that we want to know as well. We did our work at the beginning, now we're coming back, and we are committed, invested through the tireless efforts of SEPTA. I think you have educated us all, and we want to get to the place that you guys are describing.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, is there any more public comment? Okay, so now we're going to move into the business portion. Okay. Curriculum and instruction, I think
Sure,
that's going to be you.
So I thank you both, Nina and Mia, for sharing your insights around specific to your children, but more broadly around our needs. And I think, as I was listening to both of you speak, what kept coming up in my mind was that intersection between special education and general education, but more broadly around learning and instruction, and what effective instruction looks like, and how do we measure learning, and how do we qualify it, not just for our classified kids, but for all of our kids. And so that intersection is one that is real, is critical, and I think as parents of special education students, you are looking at things through a different lens, whether it's because of an IEP with very specific goals and very specific modifications or accommodations, or more broadly based on the needs of your children. You are seeing things through a very specific lens, but I think that lens really will inform the broader work around learning and instruction in our district. And so I will say thank you on behalf of our entire leadership team, because the conversations around special education have been very much front and center during all, and you know, Maureen happens to be the only person sitting here that's part of many of the leadership conversations that we have, but very much part of our discussions ongoing, specific to special ed, but more broadly around learning and instruction. So thank you for reiterating that need. We are committed to the work. I can assure you of that, and having the opportunity to partner with TESFA and Laura around this work has been a learning experience for me as well, as I've developed a deeper understanding of special education, but also, like I said, looking at the bigger picture. So thank you for that. I do think there are a couple of things that you shared that will inform practice moving forward a little bit as well, and so I thank you. So that brings me to tonight. So as you know, we have a vacant director of curriculum position, and so I have spent the last 6 months or so trying to learn as much as I can about learning in our community and what that looks like, and talking to different stakeholders, whether it's some of you sitting here, whether it's parents who are not in the room, our administrators, whether it's our teachers, whether it's our students, and hearing about the different perspectives around learning and thinking about what we need to support learning on a district level in our community. So as we know, we've had several director of curriculum people over the last 10 years or so, and so it's been an interesting journey. And while all of those people sound to have been, you know, wonderful people as individuals, we have learned from those experiences, and those have informed many of the perspectives that were shared with me, especially from our teachers and our leaders in terms of their work with people that had been in the position prior to my arrival here in July. So what I did most recently was sort of the last piece to this process in trying to learn as much as I can about our community and what our wants are and what our needs are, is that I spent time with our teachers. I went to the faculty meetings of each building, and I posed 2 questions to our staff. I asked them to tell us, how can the district continue to support your work around learning and instruction, just broadly, based on what we're doing already, based on what you want to see moving forward? So that was the first question. And then the second question was, not thinking about structure, just thinking about district level learning, overseeing, what skill set and experiences would you want to see in someone who's working in a district level capacity to support learning? So our teachers, you know, provided tremendous insight from K through 12 about some of the things that they were looking for. And I posed those 2 questions. They worked in groups. There were stickies on chart paper and lots of conversation. So what I left that with, and I think this piece was critical, because our teachers are going to be the ones who are going to be affected by whatever work we do around learning and instruction. Obviously, they're going to impact our kids as well and our building leaders, but our teachers are going to be enacting whatever it is that we're doing. So the messages that came through was that they wanted someone who is understanding and knowledgeable around the K-12 continuum. They wanted someone who can support and nurture vertical and horizontal alignment. So we're not just looking at, you know, this K-12 piece, but we're looking at across grade levels and what that looks like, while also respecting and valuing the autonomy that our teachers do appreciate and our leaders appreciate as well. They want someone who understands the evolving standards. And right now we know that the standards are changing in ELA and math. Science ones are relatively new, and social studies is also evolving. So the standards are growing. We need someone who can understand that, process that, and put it out in a manageable and understandable way that helps inform our practice. We also, I got from our teachers, they want someone who has a deep understanding of special education and of tiered interventions and what that looks like. And I can tell you that having worked in 2 other districts most recently, RTI is tough work. It is difficult work because it is really general education that's responsible for RTI, but inherently it sort of involves special education, and the process of intervention is challenging. The progress monitoring, the data collection, the meetings, and that's not to say that's not important, it's just, it's a process. So I know our team is looking for someone who has an understanding of that, which I think is great. Our team is looking for someone who can target and grow the existing strengths of our staff, right? So what are the things our teachers do well? What are the things our leaders do well? And how do we grow those things? How do we share those things out beyond maybe where they're happening in one room or one department or one building? Also someone who can understand the trends and new research in the field and offer that up to inform practice, right? So it's not just about doing what's popular, but it's about doing what's sound. And whether that we're anchoring it in brain research or whether we're anchoring it in research around learning and social learning theory, what have you, it is informing decisions based on what works. Also, someone who has a knowledge of elementary, that came up, came up a lot from our elementary teachers. I felt compelled to include that. And the phrase that came up the most was professional development or staff development, and this want for professional development from our teachers around concepts like technology, instructional technology, but also technology, assistive technology that would help students whose needs are different depending on where they're at in the readiness levels, around differentiation, around assessments, and what assessments are we using, what universal assessments exist, and tiered interventions and what that looks like. So based on that, now that's some of the skill set that they were looking for, right? When it comes to the person that we're looking for, we want someone who has strong communication skills, right? Or we want, like, awesome is really what we want, but but the descriptors that really stood out were someone who's got strong communication skills, strong interpersonal skills, someone who is flexible, someone who is open-minded, someone who can offer their perspectives, but also listen to the perspectives of others. And I think that's incredibly important. Someone who who has been a successful classroom teacher, someone who's been a successful leader in some way, shape, or form, whether that's a building leader, whether that's a leader at a district level, someone who has experience with that, someone who promotes a culture of learning, right, and a culture of continued enhancement. How are we getting better? And it's not how are we changing, but how are we getting better, right? And being mindful of the difference between innovation and change. You don't always necessarily need to change stuff when you're looking at how to innovate within which you're working with. Someone who knows how to support educators, potentially coach educators. And when I say educators, I mean leaders, teachers, teacher aides, district level people, someone who can facilitate a committee and execute that with like a clear process. And then someone who understands how to facilitate meaningful professional development, right? And professional development can come from in-house resources, can come from out of district resources, but someone who knows what professional development needs exist and then how to provide those. And also the idea of using data to inform instruction. How do we work with different data points to inform our practice? So that's sort of the general overview based on the information that was shared. The initial stuff I shared was specific to what our teachers shared with me. The secondary pieces that I highlighted came from the broader conversations with parents, with kids, with staff, with our leaders, and what they're looking for. And ultimately, what it seems is most important is the person and their skill set, right? So not just their experiences, not just their level of intelligence as it relates to IQ, but also their EQ, right? And their ability to connect with others, those soft skills, and how that will affect all the other work. And that's something we need to be mindful of. So considering all those variables, understanding what has worked in the past and what has not worked in the past, I am planning on filling the vacant position that is currently titled Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and there's been a third and attached to the position.
Personnel?
There's been personnel, there's been technology. For now, my recommendation is a Director of Learning, Instruction, and Administration, so that we can look very targeted at learning for both students and adults. For me, curriculum is about stuff. Learning is about the people that enact the stuff. The person does have to have an understanding of curriculum as well. Instruction, as it relates to the teaching aspect of our work. And administration, just broadly, I see it more related to HR, but not necessarily HR and the legalities, being part of the hiring practice, a new teacher orientation, that kind of thing. My hope would be to post the position in the next week or so, leave the position open for about a month, and then put a process in place that would involve key stakeholders from every level and have a July 1st start date. And that is how I'm recommending that we move forward at this point. I'm open for discussion. I'm open.
Tony, earlier when we've talked about this, you seem to feel that to get the quality of person you were looking for, they needed to be an assistant superintendent, not a director. Are you recommending the director level because you feel that well, I won't put words into your mouth.
So if the question is, why am I going the route of
Yes, why are you
director?
going for the director?
So I think,
Because the criteria you listed
Yes.
seem like
it's a lot.
a lot.
It is. And I don't know that we're going to necessarily be able to check off all those boxes, but it's our wish list. It's the
Right.
stuff that we'd love to see in a person. I think ultimately, I do think there's a difference between a director and assistant superintendent. But in coming to understand what I've understood over the last 6 months and getting a sense of the landscape as it is here in Hastings, this is it's charged around this position. And I think partly it's because of who's been in the position, partly it's because of how it's been enacted, partly it's because of the role that has sort of been defined. So I think if we know that this position exists, the director of curriculum, we know that as a learning organization, we need someone overseeing learning. I don't think it would be necessary to upset the apple cart, if you will, by pushing something that sounds demonstratively different than what we've had in place already. We'll see how the process goes and what our pool of candidates looks like. And then if we have to revisit the conversation, as a team, we certainly will. But I sort of read the landscape. I read the terrain.
Tea leaves.
The tea leaves. And I got a sense of what people were comfortable with.
And by people, do you mean the staff in the building, or do you mean the 7 of us, or both, or just the community in general? And if you don't want to answer and I'm putting you on the spot?
No, I think it was more broadly our community and our community of educators. I wasn't necessarily, not that, certainly your input is important, but that was one component of it. Right? Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, is there a strange rumbling?
There is a rumbling.
I feel like we're sitting over the boilers and they're going to...
Or there's a subway. Is everything okay? That's what I just want to make sure.
Yeah, but you're right.
I'm sorry if I felt distracted. I just was...
7 train is coming to get you.
That's what it feels like, and I didn't know if everything was okay.
It's back there. It's okay.
I don't know what the sound is.
only gonna hit us
I don't know what
then.
the sound is. Only you and I are going down.
Okay,
Me
all
and
right,
Doug.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
So, yeah. Go ahead,
I have a question about how we're going to, or how the district plans to go about finding applicants.
Yeah.
So what process do you foresee using? What resources are we going to try and use to help us find the best candidate?
So first and foremost, we're dedicated to establishing a pool of candidates that will represent not only a skill set, but also underrepresented groups of people that don't typically necessarily end up in a pool of candidates within the world of education, especially in suburbia, like our county, like Nassau County. So we're going to dedicate some efforts there. We spoke last month about the training that we went to with NEMNIT. And so actually, I met today with our administrative assistant in HR, and we talked about process for how we're going to move forward. So one of the things that we're going to do as a very sort of specific strategy is link up with specific professors in schools of education within a 2 to 3 hour radius of our community. So for example, we found a professor at Columbia, whose name I cannot remember right now, but she has done a lot of work around the diversification of staff in the educational landscape. As part
Columbia
of
being TC, I'm sorry.
She's at TC.
She's at TC.
Yeah, sorry. So that was just one example. We partnered with a woman at Lehman who is a professor at the Educational Leadership Program. We're going to send information her way to share with the community there. We're doing that much more targeted, because we got feedback from Nina. Actually happened to send an email that really sparked the thought in my head, because we were doing general, like career services, and they have these like virtual bulletin boards, but we weren't meeting with much success. But what I know, as someone who's been an adjunct professor and has sat in graduate courses myself, when you can get with the right professor who has access to someone who has knowledge and understanding of this work, to be able to tap the shoulder of some specific students, that's a way to get a much more targeted pool of candidates, right? And giving them the description of what we're looking for. So Lehman is one that we're looking at, Teachers College, Bank Street, and there was one more that was high on the list, NYU and Fordham. In addition to, there's Manhattanville and Mercy, that College of Mount St. Vincent that are there as well. We also are looking into potential, there are job fairs that are minority recruitment fairs is what they are typically called. So we're looking to see if any of those are happening in the near future in our vicinity.
Lynn is going.
And Lynn is going, okay. So that's part of where we're starting. And when I say that, that's for the entire pool of candidates. It's not that we're just looking for a diverse pool of candidates, but we feel like if we can really drill down and get into sort of the hands of people who are working with students who would potentially be these people, whether they're getting their master's or their PhD or whatever, that's a really targeted place to start with this process. And certainly, advertise it, more broadly as well. OLAS is not necessarily the most awesome tool. So we'll find other ways to spread the word about the position and make sure that we access candidates from different communities as well. In terms of process, I see it being several steps. One of the things that came from our training was that we want to have several sets of eyes on resumes so we can mitigate any biases that go into, all right, well, this person, I don't know, graduated from that school, so forget it. But let's look at the resume a little more carefully, That is something that's important to us as I think about the process. The process would involve teachers, parents, kids, administrators, and it would be multiple rounds. So that's a rough outline of what I'm envisioning. I don't know if that answered your question, Christine.
Yeah, no, it did. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
How would this person be involved in evaluation?
So they would be involved in teacher evaluation, much like every other, the directors are. Our athletic director is not, because we have just an exception for this year. But our special education director is, our assistant special ed director. I am involved in teacher observations. So one of the things that came back from our teachers, which I think is really important, we don't want someone who's coming to tell us what to do. We don't need another boss. We don't want someone who's looking at this from an evaluative perspective. And so it's understanding that in some instances they are going to go in and observe teachers, because that's just part of the process. We divvy it up. I get my 20 teachers, you get your 20 teachers. But beyond that, the role can involve coaching that is non-evaluative. And so hearing that piece was important. Also, our teachers referenced coaches specifically, and I do see that as potentially part of our curriculum plan in the long term, when we are able to begin not only articulating a vision, but enacting a vision on a K-12 continuum and seeing what exactly we want to target. And so I appreciate the input of our teachers and their willingness to engage with coaching, because that's hard work too, because someone's really in your space and telling you try this and do that. And so I applaud their willingness to be open to that. So yeah. But they will be observing teachers, a certain number of teachers.
As part of the APPR?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. And especially at the district level, we serve that role of being the independent. We're not in the building, so we could be that second person.
Okay.
And we did hire a lot of staff. We had 19 new staff members this year alone, right? So in addition to whatever untenured staff we have, those people all get 2 formal observations and 1 informal.
Right.
So it's a lot.
It's a lot.
I've done like 25 observations, myself, which I'm not looking to give up, but that's the way we divvied it up. So.
Are there any other questions from board members?
I have another question, I'm sorry. So in going back as to teacher needs and concerns, there was something brought up about elementary school teachers feeling that there was a specific need. Is it of knowledge of elementary or background in elementary?
I think primarily the latter, that there's knowledge of elementary.
Okay.
But if there was background, that would be nice as well. Now, what we talked about when I was at Hillside, I do have that. I have that background and I have that experience.
Right.
And so the person that would be our director, while their primary charge will be learning and instruction, that is going to be a partnership that I see myself, at least at that visionary sort of macro level, being very much a part of. The elementary even more so, which is one of the reasons I've dedicated a lot of time at Hillside. because it is an area I feel like I can just offer support and offer insight. So I think the teachers were, again, I don't want to speak for them, but from what I was hearing, the chat, we don't want some person that doesn't know what elementary is like coming to tell us what to do in elementary. And that's not what we're looking, that's not what I'm envisioning for a person to come and do.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry, Tim.
No, go with your question and I'll...
So my question then would be, is that while certainly looking for somebody with knowledge of elementary, given your background, wouldn't we really be wanting some sort of balance? Whereas we're not heavy loaded or, with people who have that experience and knowledge, but we also need people who are, at the upper echelons of administration who understand middle school and high school secondary.
yeah, 100%. If I could add to the checklist of what the ideal candidate would have, it would be experience at the secondary level, either as a teacher or ideally as a leader on some level, whether they're a department chair or a principal, assistant principal. I think that's an experience I have not had, and certainly is, it's not a blind spot because I'm aware of it, but it's it's a spot that I can learn continuously from as well. And fortunately, we have two leaders at the middle school and high school level here in our district that have been here, a long time, and so they have an understanding and a depth of understanding of our community that would help this person as well. So.
Thank you. Sorry, Tim, I didn't realize you were asking.
So I guess my question is much more just operational. The last search that we've gone through was for you, and it was quarterbacked by a search firm. So we were able to get fairly regular updates on the pool of candidates as it was evolving. So we're looking at a start date to post at the end of this month. What's the process you envision of keeping us informed of the pool as it's developing, how the pool sort of corresponds to this wish list of a dozen items?
I know there's a lot there, and
there's a lot, and
we're not going to get them all necessarily.
Of course. But I guess, in the simplest terms, what's the next checkpoint for us? Let's assume it's listed in a week's time. What's the next checkpoint where I can touch base with you and say, how does the pool look relative to this?
So I envision the application period being open about a month, just because of the nature of February and it being sort of a short month. And I think it's a really big decision for someone to decide to apply for this position. And so, knowing what I went through when I applied here, it took me like 2 weeks to decide if that was something I wanted to even, do. So I think we want to give it enough time for people to play around with that. So if, let's say the deadline is February 26th, just throwing it out there, it could be give or take a couple of days. I envision that at our March 5th board meeting, I could give you an update as to what at least the pool looks like. And then from that point, our next board meeting, I believe, is March 16th. I believe I'd be able to give you an update there because I should have hopefully started screening people at that point based on what the pool is. Then, though, I don't think we have a meeting until April after that. But I'll certainly update you before that. But those two checkpoints are actually great time-wise, because by March 5th, we'll know what the pool looks like. By March 16th, we may even have like an understanding in person of what the pool looks like, not just on paper. So, and if we are in a discussion on March 5th about the lack of a pool, then we have to revisit the conversation about what we're doing, or where we're advertising, or whatever, and kind of go from there. We did talk about advertising in the Times, and so Doug and I just had an informal conversation, but just advertising in general for positions. And so the Times is one of the Times is not cheap to advertise in, but we'll also see if there is something about the Times that reaches a broader potential applicant beyond like the Westchester, Rockland area, and we may have other positions that we know of, so we can kind of put them in an advertisement together. So that's something that we'll look at. I'm putting a call into the New York Times tomorrow because they did just have a special where it was like half off. Of course, I missed the deadline.
That was the conversation. We were advertising for you.
Yes.
That was it, Lisa? Was it Bob and Joanne that said there was no?
Yeah, that we were advised that the Times is sort of more my generation at this point, especially the print edition, because the ads
Yeah.
People may look, may not. Anyway, we were advised, and we did not advertise in the Times for
I think we
you.
saved like 10 grand.
I think it was actually
Significant
20.
money.
Well, we're only
It's
gonna-
about 20 unless you catch that special, but I think
That's
it's
it.
a one-time only special. At least it was last year.
It is typically, but
It was like they have a certain edition every year.
Fee is looking to see if she can work her magic tomorrow. If it's a significant amount of money, which it is regularly, then
It
we'll
was
probably
20.
look at it. Yeah, so it depends
20
on
for like that much.
depends on the size you get, exactly. So I'll keep you posted on what we do. I think, ultimately, I envision also, as part of these discussions with targeting professors, let's say at TC or at Fordham or Lehman, you're also going to dip into a pool of candidates from like New York City public schools or even potentially Nassau County or Bergen County in Jersey. And so, yeah, so the New York Times piece kind of was about that, because truthfully, I taught a course at Lehman with a bunch of aspiring leaders, and they are all working in New York City. And at the time, I was working in Long Island, and they were like, "We don't know how to find jobs in Westchester. Like, we don't know. It's like you only know someone, and that's how you get in, kind of thing." And so, in those conversations, they were talking about how they defer to things like Ed Week in the Times. So again, not to say that that's the be-all and end-all. I think
Do you get an online component with the Times
you
as
do,
well?
and it actually runs longer than the print one.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not
I mean,
committed to it.
yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily going to be the deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. I do think if we can link up with the right school, like professors within schools, we'll tap into a different pool of candidate than any advertising. Because we'll be able to go, hey, tell your students about, not all your students necessarily, but do you have 3 or 4 students that you think might qualify for this position?
I guess the one question is,
Yes.
there's a whole range of possible applicants that aren't current students.
Yep.
And presumably professors are still in touch with their past students, but the connectivity goes down with time.
Agreed, and that's just one. That's one target. There's also BOCES, and BOCES is great about spreading the word. BOCES, especially Putnam, is pretty big, and so they'll typically post for you, which is great. We do have a coaster with them, so it's not like it's necessarily an added cost. I also think it's word of mouth. I had a meeting with my mentor today, and we're talking about some other stuff, and I said, hey, if we had a position open, is that something that I could reach out to you and see who you? And she was like, yeah, absolutely. So I think it's. That's a path to go. Yeah. So.
I have a question and
Go,
a
please.
comment.
Yes.
The question is, what will be the relationship between this person and the principals? Will they be on the same level? Will the principals report to this person?
Well, we're not changing anything structurally in this recommendation, so this person is in the same unit as the principals. I will still be the one evaluating the principals. Will there be district level work that this person is overseeing? Yeah. And will that affect principals? Likely. Hey, we're doing this. This is what you need to do in your building. That kind of thing.
But the principals would
I'm still the
you would be the
supervisor.
direct report?
Yes.
Okay.
Of all these people. Like Laura. I'm
Okay,
yes.
okay.
mhm.
And the other thing I wanted to make was a comment, and I know we've shared these discussions before, that we've had this position filled by 4 different people with not a dissimilar job description from what you've read, and it just hasn't worked. And why, I don't know. Personally, I've always felt that it's too much for one person with no team. It's a department without a department under it. And I don't know of any other districts that have a head of curriculum with no staff, no math specialist, no ELA specialist, no coach. I think all the other river towns have the specialists, I believe, and the head. So I know right now we're talking budget and what we can fit in, and I know you've mentioned in the future down the road, maybe we could get these specialists, and I would just like to say that from living through the past 10 or 12 years of these curriculum directors that haven't worked out, and from living through, don't get me wrong, this school has served my children beautifully, but I remember when my daughter was in Hillside, there was no math program, then there was a Trailblazer math program, then there was an everyday math program, then it switched, I believe, to something else, and then it became Engage New York, and now we're off Engage New York. So we've had a lot of lack of consistency. What I would like to just put out there is, as we review the budget and as we get input, is there a way that we can have the director position, which we will move forward with, but also allocate some funding to specialists, ELA, math, be it K-8, be it 5-8, and I have specific reasons why I think we really need them, and I'm going to separate math and ELA. ELA, we had Gravity Goldberg come in last year, and she did a needs assessment, and she said, you have no ELA curriculum. And we had kids who were stuck with that for a few years, and they dealt with Engage New York, which it's just not good in the ELA. It's better in math, but it's not good in the ELA. Those kids are now in the middle school, and I have heard commentary that these kids don't have the same strengths as kids from earlier generations because they did not get it at Hillside. They're choosing books that aren't as hard as kids their age chose before. They're having trouble writing without particular prompts. So I think in the middle school, because we have Gravity at the elementary, I would love to see whatever is appropriate, a part-time, a full-time literacy coach. The reason I think that we need math, and math may even be more pressing, is, we've been hearing, concerns over the years about how math at Farragut may not be meeting the needs of the highest achievers. And what that's sort of morphed into now is we have families who think, when they think that their child is that accelerated or should be that accelerated, that child is now trying to take algebra in 7th grade. Algebra is a 9th grade class. We accelerate into 8th grade. To push it to 7th grade, some people feel is not appropriate. But we've never, I think Farragut tried to improve its math program. They came to the board a few years ago saying, hey, we want our 5th graders to switch math teachers, but the funding was denied. We've heard suggestions like, why do 8th grade algebra students miss out on 8th grade math, but other schools, like I think Ardsley, takes 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math and crunches it into 6 and 7. So they don't miss out on the 8th grade math, then they take algebra. Or a school like Scarsdale has honors options. I think in 7th grade you can go into an honors math. I don't think that can happen without, I think it needs the director and the math specialist to make it happen. You talked about, tiered learning. I think the director is up here designing the car, but we need people there with the teachers creating the tiered learning, creating the new curriculum. I mean, if you're going to rewrite, let's say we decide to take 6th, 7th, and 8th and crunch it into 6th and 7th. That's a lot of curriculum writing, and I don't know that a director alone can do it. And I understand there's a path you can say hire the director and then let the director figure things out and then look at the specialist. But that's more loss. That's another year of kids who didn't have the ELA still not getting the support, of math staying the way it is, of our special education students perhaps not getting assignments that are differentiated, in a very, I'm picturing a specialist on a granular level coming in and not telling our teachers what to do, but helping them create differentiated lessons. So my request is that as we work with the budget, let's consider this and see if it's something that we can make happen. And again, I'll look, last year we hired Gravity in April and she hit the ground running in June. If we hired a math specialist, perhaps that person could do a needs assessment and then could hold hands with the director and help the director in that way move things forward at a quicker pace. So that was what I wanted to say.
And I'll say thank you for supporting anything that we can do to build the focus on learning and instruction. I think it's great, and I appreciate that perspective. And I think in order to have this conversation, we also need the building leadership to be part of it. I think many of the things you brought up goes back to building leadership and what they envision for their staff, programmatically and pedagogically speaking. So I think that's incredibly important. And I know, the idea of coaches have come up from our building leaders, and then having conversations around what that looks like. Because we can go so many different ways. We can make an argument for, do we want to roll the work that Gravity is doing at Hillside up to the middle school? Because that would make very logical sense on some level. You don't want to necessarily have someone coming in and doing ELA coaching at the middle school that's not, congruent with that potentially, and that doesn't necessarily have to be, Gravity. It's an approach. So I think the idea of coaches or specialists are very much at the top of my list. Clearly, our teachers are feeling that way as well. But I do think we need to kind of lay the groundwork and have an understanding of what our vision looks like in practice, like what are our priorities and how do we help
coaches or specialists target those things, and certainly coaches and specialists will inform that as well. I think it's somewhat cyclical in nature. So I think we're very much on the same page, and so it may just be a timeline thing and really thinking about the long term.
I guess I have one question for sort of the sitting teacher on the board. How would your colleagues in your district react to 3 new hires around curriculum in a single year? Positively, neutral, or negatively, do you think? Just first reaction.
Good question. I think in part it depends upon what the objective is of the district and how much say the district is really going to give teachers. I think there's a lot of lip service out there that, we want your input and we value what you have to say as teachers. And I don't even want to say at the end of the day, I want to say before the day, the decision has been made as to what the teachers are going to do. Yeah. So I think teachers would welcome coaching that's valuable. I'm currently getting coaching on next generation standards for social studies that has value. I've gotten plenty of other PD in social studies. I actually recently got RTI PD that was useless. I knew all the information. It was nothing that if the person printed out their PowerPoint slide, I couldn't read myself. Yeah. So I think it depends on who's hired. And I also would say the following. While I understand the concern of 3 new hires, and I absolutely agree that teachers would push back on that, I would also say that as currently a middle school teacher, what I see not only in my classroom, but I also see in my own home with a child of a middle schooler, is exactly what Lisa's talking about. We have talked about, special ed students, and I have a special ed student, another child, who has missed out, as sort of both Nina and Mia have said. Time's run out for him, and there's an urgency there. But I do feel that there is an urgency for this group of kids who were brought in Common Core when they were in 2nd and 3rd grade, and they are now 6th, 7th, 8th graders. I see a decline in basic literacy. I see a huge decline in basic writing skills, and I'm not talking general ed students. I'm talking about the high-flying students who should know how to write a sentence. I see that in my own home, and my daughter is a high honor roll student. And I look at her paper, and quite honestly, I say to myself, really? Yeah. Because I wouldn't give it that. And
the grades coming back on the work and the acceptance of...
Yeah, and I would say that this year, I feel like this is the first year that her ELA teacher is really holding her feet to the fire. But she's struggling because she didn't have the foundation. And again, she's a high honor roll student. She does not have the issues my son has. So I do feel that this is a unique group of students that, because Common Core came out, because many districts didn't know how to handle it, and it's no fault on Hastings. I'm not saying Hastings is to blame. I'm not saying that it is an outlier. I think it's very typical that most districts didn't know how to deal with Common Core, didn't implement it properly, and you have a crop of students who have missed out.
Tony, my comment would be that I think while I understand the urgency, I also, based on the past experience of the people we've had doing this in this position, and just with change in the district in general, school districts, you can't turn them on a dime, and I think that to set the district up for success and to set the person in this position up for success involves,
sort of thought and planning as to what's needed in terms of coaching. The coaching that's going on right now in the elementary school is not being done through an employee, it's being done through consultants. So maybe that's the best approach for other things, you know, also in terms of ongoing expenses for the district. If you have good coaching through consultants that are not going to become an ongoing line item in the district, you know, there's a different financial implication. Maybe that's the best thing, maybe staff, but, you know, I would, you sort of have to put, I think you need to go in stages, and I think you do need to do what you're doing, which is get this position in place, and between you and that person and the rest of the administrators, you can then start figuring out how to dig deeper into it.
Yeah.
So.
Any other comments?
I would just share that, you know, I think in any change process, I would agree with you, Donna. You know, you've got your A where you're starting, you've got your B where you want to end up, and then C is how do you get from A to B. I think this group is pretty lined on B. I mean, I think we want as strong as we can get, given the budget that we have, academics in ELA, math, you know, science and social studies. And I think I don't even know how much difference there is in C. You know, I mean, even as we talk about here, let's hire them at the same time. The reality of hiring is that even if you said, let's hire them all at the same time, we could, if we really do a great job, get someone director of curriculum by, director of learning by, you know, July 1. And we still might not have the people we want or the coaches we want by that time anyways. And if we did hire some of those people, I think there's a reality that I mean, you're saying you have a great math coach you're working with right now, and I mean, just as someone who hires, I mean, who's been around a lot of hiring in the corporate world, you know, there's also not great math coach that could come in and not nail it. And so we've raced to get 3 new positions in here, and we haven't hit it out of the park with all of them, and then we're backtracking, and, you know, I really strongly agree with Donna that you know, there are a whole bunch of things that have happened in the past that there's some frustrations about, and I wasn't there for all of them, and I can't say what's rightly so or wrongly so, but suffice it to say, I'm sure there's some stuff that's happened that's frustrating. But I don't think we want to, and you know, as some of the people in the audience have shared, and as you've just shared as well, Christina, you know, we're out of time, and you know, I don't know exactly what that means. We can't make up time right now. We have to move as quickly as we can with what we have. And you know, and I guess, Tony, the challenge I would put to you is, how can you ensure you're moving as fast as you can in a responsible way? And that is not, there's not a scientific answer to that question. And I'm sure you're going to find spots that this board is going to be able to be critical for you on, where you say you didn't move fast enough. And then there are going to be spots we're going to be critical and saying you pulled the trigger too quickly. And we're not with you on a day-to-day basis. And so I think we have to trust you. And at the same time, I want to say, I want to challenge you to go as fast as you can and as fast you think we should go and no faster. Right?
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you started with, no, that's not scientific. I do want to offer a perspective, though, a couple of things. So that idea of change and that process, in my experience, you know, if kind of looking at this as the root and this is the surface, change is happening at both ends till you get to the middle somewhere. And that's where I have found it to be sustainable and actually changing practice in the way that people think and in the way that people behave. And so as opposed to just, you know, ripping out the roots or just staying at the top, you do have to systemically and very consciously kind of work up and down. But what we need to recognize, because in my professional opinion, because of all the change in leadership, especially at the district level, in our community, in our district, in order to enact change, you have to be really mindful of where people are sitting today, because change has not happened in some, and this is not a criticism of anyone before me, but when you have 4 curriculum people in 8 years or 10 years or whatever it is, that is a very difficult structure to enact change from, right? Because every one of those people has a different vantage point, different experience, different philosophy, yada, yada, yada. And I think our teachers have understandably kind of put their head down a little bit and like, all right, we're just going to wait this out because at some point this person's going to go, and we're going to keep doing the best that we can, that we know. We're going to keep trying to do what is best for our kids. But what happens when something like that occurs is that some of the things that are going on now become normalized and probably shouldn't be, and could have been addressed if it was, more consistent in terms of the vision and the leadership. And again, it's nothing bad per se, but it's not best practice, and we could have pulled that weed right out and kept moving because it wouldn't have hurt. So it's now being mindful of where our staff sits, because they have spent years, I think, sitting and kind of figuring things out and moving ahead. And I'm not saying, I don't mean sitting like that they haven't moved in the last day, but really going back to that notion of autonomy. And so when we enact change, we have to be respectful. When I lead change in our district, I have to be respectful of that want for autonomy, of that natural skill set that exists, the strengths that exist, but also recognize that there are areas that we need to get better at. And so it's kind of bridging those two things. Is it going to happen quickly? Certain things will happen quickly. But for it to be systemic and for it to change, we're also talking about a shift in culture. And it's slight, but it's significant. And so, even, you shared, like mounds of like photocopy paper, one of the binders. So we talk about that idea of like even something like worksheets, right? We could spend a whole year studying what's a good worksheet, what's a bad worksheet, how many work, but that's like a really important philosophical conversation to have. Do different kids get different worksheets? Does homework, it's a conversation, and I'm guessing it's one that has not happened, only because, and that's, I'm really picking low-hanging fruit. That's an easy one to really talk about, but it's also not a priority necessarily. So, so it's really looking at the stuff up here and the stuff down here, and kind of getting to the middle with our team, with our leadership team, with our teachers. And what I can tell you is our teachers are so open. And I walk in and out of their classrooms, and there's no hesitation. There's no like, oh gosh, why is he? Maybe in their heads they're thinking, why is he here? But no one's closing the door. No one's like, get out. You laugh, but that's what happened in my former district initially, because it was not the norm. Here, our teachers, I think, are really proud of the work that they're doing. They're really excited about the work that they're doing, and in fact, they get invited to classrooms. I think that's a really great starting point. So while I can't tell you how fast it's going to go, I do think it's going to be faster than I anticipated, just based on what I've experienced before, not here. But I also think we have to be really intentional and systematic about how we do things so that it changes long term. And it's not just, okay, we're going to do, like you were saying, Lisa, we went from, I don't even know, the Common Core to this, this workbook to, that's nothing, right? Trailblazer to the Eureka. It's not about that. Right? So if we can shift the conversation and talk about pedagogy, what does good math instruction look like, whether you're using the modules or you're using, Eureka, that's the sweet spot. But that takes work. And so anyway, I can go on. Yeah, I know.
Which is simply that I think it makes without a question, a lot of sense to have this director of curriculum and learning come in. I think through also that it's a small district. What I alluded to, my question to you, but I'll just be very direct in saying is I think the ecosystem of the school, and the daily ecosystem of the school with the instructors, with the teachers, you're sort of suggesting around it, but I'll just be very plain and blunt about it. I think we need to respect their input and their autonomy, and everything I've ever heard in feedback from the teachers that I know, and obviously I know one well. That autonomy is incredibly important, and it just strikes me as completely intuitive and logical that a director is here, spend some time developing buy-in from the teachers, and then even more importantly is actively involved in the determination of what coaching staff is needed, either full-time staff or consultants, and that person, having developed real buy-in from our staff, has been actively part of the second step. And I guess the final thing I'll say is I'm as sensitive as anybody, particularly with kids similar age, that time is of the essence, and that, gaps, to the extent that they exist, they're hard to fill as they get older.
Yes.
And I'm sensitive to wanting to do everything yesterday to get academic achievement to the level where we all want it to be. But we have, as a board, an obligation to balance that desire with also a balance of developing our district in the right way and in the right process, and doing it in a way that's as you get my point. So I'll stop there, but I wanted to be on the record and on camera saying exactly that, because I think it's the right way to do it.
And I appreciate
agree
that.
with that.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just saying I agree with you, Tim.
I think it's envisioning this person starting in the summer, going through a somewhat similar process to what I went through in terms of entry and getting to know people and getting to hear people, which will make my experience as a second-year, person here much different, which is great, because there are places that I could accelerate something on because this person can do that, right? But the challenge is, and I only speak from experience in doing this in more than one organization, respecting everyone's autonomy and their strengths. At the same time, you're also uncovering areas that they need to grow, and that's uncomfortable, and that is challenging. So we are going to get pushback. I'm telling you now, right? And I'm not even talking about you did this in your classroom. It's not even that specific, but that's what's going to happen. And I've seen it with the most amazing teachers, and I've seen it with the teachers who are struggling with developing their skill set. It's respecting that autonomy, but recognizing as part of that autonomy, if you're going to be a self-directed learner, that means you also have to be recognizing where your blind spot, except that there's blind spots in your work, and that we can enhance our craft constantly. And so I think, if nothing else, if my vision for our district gets enacted, it's that we are all learners first, educators second, or even third, maybe thinkers second. So that's really important to me as part of this work. So.
I'm sorry, I just have one last thing to say too, because I think, Lisa, you had made reference to the people that had been in this position before and that it hadn't, I don't remember I'm not going to try and paraphrase what you said, but the impression I got was that sort of none of them had worked out. And I think that being on the board through all four of them, I think that the fact that there was a succession of so many people in such a short period of time meant that didn't work out well for the district. But I think each of them had strengths, and there was positive stuff going on with each of them, and each of them ended up leaving for completely different reasons than each of the other ones. So it wasn't like we were making the same mistake over and over again. It was, in some cases the person left because there was something else they preferred to do, had nothing to do with the district. In some cases it might not have been a good fit with the district. Each situation was different, and I think through all of it, the board and the administration was trying to get to the same place I think Tony's trying to get to now, and I don't think we should, I don't think anyone's suggesting we do, but I'm just saying first of all, I do thank each of those people for what they attempted to do, and in some cases, sorry they didn't stay longer. But I think that we're going to keep trying this till we get it right, because I think it's a very important role in a school district.
Let me just say, following up, I don't know if we had this discussion or if I meant to bring it to you. Would it be worthwhile for you to reach out to our former employees and find out what were the problems in the position, what worked, to help us frame this going forward?
I think that's a great
and I think
suggestion.
they're all, at least three of them are relatively
right.
local. I don't know about the
I do have regular contact with Jeremy, Jeremy Luft, who was just here. I have had contact with Mike Mahoney, who was a teacher here and was in that position, and
Michelle Mitlack, I believe, is in Peekskill.
Yeah, her I have not.
And I don't know where Rhonda Cohen is. She's in Massachusetts.
I believe yes, right, yeah. So I think that's a great idea. But
And please know that nothing I shared was to discount the work that they did at all. I mean, I think Jeremy is really, really a bright young man who offered a lot in his time here, and in the conversations I had with him, I kind of wish he stayed. But that being said, just speaking about the change, I think is what...
No, and I agree with you. I just wanted to...
So thank you. I mean, I really appreciate even being able to partner with all of you on this discussion, and it'll be ongoing. And we may be back here a month from now if there is no pool of candidates.
I just want to go on record as well. I just want to just sort of reiterate is that while I appreciate the work that Gravity Goldberg is doing at Hillside, there is a gap in middle school and high school. And that while a director is coming in, and we'll look at that, I really, truly feel that this district needs to pay equal attention to those two other schools. And it seems to me from some of my experience, obviously I don't, I have my perspective, but from what I'm hearing from other people as well, there is a sense and there is a feeling that the middle school and the high school, while the teachers are excellent and the administrators are trying really hard, that they need that equal level of support.
And I'll add, the math at Farragut became a pretty hot button issue this year. I think there was concern about 1 year's worth of test scores, which led to a very, very long Facebook thread, which led to an evening meeting that had a packed library. So I agree, there is concern. I'll also throw out, when we talk about coaches, if we have the money to do, full-time, that's great. Or we may want to say, you know what? This year, we got to focus on maybe ELA or math, or maybe a 0.5 and a 0.5. I mean, there's a lot of ways around this, but like I said, I look at what Gravity Goldberg did. She came in, she did a needs assessment, started working, and I guess I see whoever we hire. I mean, it would be great to have people in place to help him out. I mean, I don't know if he or she's going to have a certain idea of who that person may want, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm just picking up on what you're saying, that I support what you're saying.
If I may pose the question, I don't know what the impetus was for Gravity's work. I don't know.
Well, I can share. I mean, Roy and Amy together were focused on changing the literacy instruction at the elementary school. And one of the reasons Amy was hired was because she had a balanced literacy background. And so her professionalism in that was what led us into getting Gravity Goldberg. She'd worked with her in the past, and that was clearly something that was a focus there. So I kind of would like to say, why don't we bring it back to, have Tony take it back to the administrators, because Gail must have some ideas about what she wants to have happen in her school, and Lou can talk about what's going on with the kids at that school, and they...
Yeah. Exactly.
Even if you're going to do the same kind of thing that we did with Gravity, which is, we want you to come in and take a look at literacy here because we think we need balanced literacy, and can you come in and talk about that? At least if we could end up with a direction from the from the administrators, they know best what's going on with the students, and that way you might be able to get something going sort of more quickly. I would be leery about hiring staff for it right away. I think, you can probably talk around different, you now know somebody who's a great, social studies coach. Somebody's got to know a good math coach. I mean, Gravity has an excellent reputation, and I think that was why, and Amy had worked with her in the past, so maybe we can just sort of leverage both the knowledge that the administrators have, and then also, tap into some really good coaches that people are aware of from other districts around. So.
I mean, that sounds great. We have to have the input. Okay.
Are we
moving on, or are there more comments?
No, I think we need to move on. Okay. I mean, obviously this is key and crucial, but...
I can keep you here all night on curriculum if you'd like.
Okay, moving on. Our business items, we have our business items also included under that topic is our placement and our services for CSE and CPSE. We can take them as a consent agenda unless anybody wants to pull anything out. Does anybody want to pull anything out? Okay. May I have a motion to approve all items under number 5 business?
So moved.
And a second, please? Second. All in favor? Opposed? Next is personnel, and we have several categories: appointments, retirement, resignations, Those are the three. Tony, is there anything that we need to discuss on these?
No, but just to know that we did receive Sue Horowitz's retirement letter. She's a guidance counselor at Farragut Middle School. She will be retiring at the end of the year, but as I mentioned last time, we will be honoring our retirees at the May 15th board meeting. So she'll be there, or well, she'll be invited and she'll be there.
How long she's been here? I feel like she's been here.
I believe she got her 25-year plaque when you did your opening services. I think it's 25 years.
Yeah, I think it's about that.
You have a lot going on.
I don't know. But she's
Hope for
been,
May 15th.
I know she's here long enough that she had to put in by January 15th. She's got to be at least 20 years, I know that. But that's it, just, and we'll talk a little bit about her, if she, I mean, hopefully she'll join us on May 15th.
May I have a motion to approve all of the personnel items?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of our January 8th meeting? Okay, sorry.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Committee reports. Finance, Eileen, you want to do that?
Yeah, I guess I just want to frame it initially. 5 of us were at that meeting, so I feel like it's really a big disadvantage for Jody and for Donna who weren't there, because there was an awful lot of detail and talk, and I feel like we have to be sort of, we might want to consider changing the way we're running some of these things. If we're going to have that much of the board, I think we need to have the whole board and do it as a work session, because there's an awful lot that gets talked about. Also, we can't really make decisions as a subcommittee of the board, so we're morphing from being a board to being a committee, and somewhere in there where we're getting sort of messed up. That being said, there was a lot that we talked about. We looked at the state runs for aid. We looked at the change in the growth factor and the additional amount of revenue that would allow us to raise. We had a little bit of discussion about where we are on that. Some of us were a little bit less comfortable with raising to the max. There's, you know, you start to get into these sort of bigger philosophical questions of, do you go to the cap all the time? Do you raise the maximum allowed in the cap so that you don't have to do it in the future? The cap process itself kind of pushes you in that direction. But on the same side, you know, if you're doing that, you're also going to be having relatively fluctuating fund balances, because you're trying to raise funds for when you will have a need, and we all know that there are certain needs that will come. Teacher, you know, and retirement reserves will go up, healthcare will go up. This year we have a lot of additional special ed expenses that we need to fund. So there just are expenses that come along, so you have to be a little bit careful. And I don't think that's the kind of thing where I feel like we really need to be the whole board there, because I think in order for us to really share and give a direction on it, that, you know, rather than have it being a committee at this point, I think we need to get going on the bigger picture. We also talked about Maureen went through all the little things that she had recommended putting into the budget, and these are things, some of it will come out in the February 5 meeting, some will come out because they're non-classroom related.
It's
non-instructional. Some will wait until the instructional bit, but we also looked at the question of class sizes and how large class sizes would get. If there's a sort of framework that we want to do, and I think one of the things that came from that was it's hard to set up a specific, you know, red line, and you're not going to step across. You touch that one, you go back the other direction, you touch that, and you add a new section. These are really at the elementary school, where, you know, adding a section is really possible. But I think the thing that came from that was, even if you look at, say, you want to say, okay, well, we want to be maybe the max we want in a K1 class is 23, you also have to look at the way the class is made up. Who are the children, what are the needs in that actual class, to say, well, 23 is not going to work with that mix of kids. Like one year we had a lot of E&L kids, and you know, for them it really was necessary to bring it down to have a smaller class size. So hard lines, which I don't think this district does too well anyway, persist to be something we're not going to try to strive for. But I think that, you know, it is important to have those discussions, because those are ways that you can, if you are running into problems with expenses, those are big buckets. You know, one teacher is a lot of money. You know, changing the number of, you know, making the kids pay for ice time is a small amount of money. Funding graphing calculators is just relatively small. Those are small buckets. This is a big bucket, which is one of those things that's harder to deal with. Because, you know, there are a lot of implications from changing the class sizes. So there are a lot of different things, but I really think when we start to go through the budgets, I really think we need to do it as a group. as a whole group. I just don't think it's, and then we could actually have a policy meeting. So,
Well, do we want to
Is
talk
that the
about?
segue right now?
well, we haven't had.
No, we have no
We didn't,
policy.
yeah, we didn't have one, so we don't
But we
really.
do have, do we,
Oh,
is
we
this the
have
second
the
read now?
second read, yes.
But
Lisa.
do we want to talk briefly about that work session, like when we should have that, or?
Sure, I'm happy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, so Feb 5, I mean,
Should we schedule, we only have one board meeting scheduled in February. Should we schedule a work session for the end of February, maybe to talk about this, just a standing, you know?
Well, we could do it either when we have both sections of the budget, the instructional and the non-instructional. We
So
could wait till
February 5th
then.
is just non-instructional,
Right.
right? So there really isn't much.
So it's the March 5th that was
March
going to
5th
come
is
up with
the
the,
instruction.
yeah.
So
So maybe
sometime
between-
before the March 5th, yeah, that's what,
Maybe right after the break, if we can look at a night that works.
yeah, maybe we can find a work session night.
the week
And
of
there is
February
the-
26th?
Yeah, there is Monday, the 26th is the, it's like right after the
just like,
vacation.
Does that compete with the PTSA meeting? Because I think this is stuff the public is interested in.
No, not according to me.
There's nothing, okay.
I'm not saying there's nothing.
Well, it's not the night of a normal board meeting, so it would be unlikely to be the night of a liaison meeting unless they
Probably,
reschedule.
right, probably.
But
So February
maybe
26th?
maybe Pete can check the.
She can check, but
So we're toying right now with February 26th? So it's right after the break?
Yeah, it's literally the date.
the first day back.
Okay, we'll send some.
You would get the entire budget at that point, because it would be.
Yeah, and we can talk
like,
about-
you can't talk about the budget and say, well, we won't talk about that until February.
We could
And
do it
yeah, that
on
way if
March
there's some-
5th, too, as, well, but that's a regular board
I think it'd be
meeting.
better if we have
Yeah.
more discussion about it than to
Yes.
do it
Yes.
prior to the.
You saying on the 26th?
Yeah,
26 probably works, yeah.
Well,
26 for a work session, we're saying.
yeah.
yes.
Potentially.
Does that work for
We
everyone?
need to then
Yeah, I
push
can do
back.
that.
Should we do what we were going to do February 5th on February 26th instead?
But I wouldn't mind. Janine, are you able to
I don't know,
access the
Maxine.
district calendar to see? There's nothing on the 26th?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we had nothing scheduled. This was the first day back.
Great,
From what I
okay.
remember.
And you should probably invite all the administrators there if they're going to be further discussion.
Oh, that's a good
Great
idea.
idea.
If it's a work session.
Yeah, that's a great
Let them
idea.
talk about the different.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be talking about these other items.
So this is going to be a work session to discuss the budget. The public can attend, the administrators can attend. Okay.
Great idea.
Question, did we, I know we're
How
not
early
up
can
to
you start?
policy yet, but
I
since
know.
we're
Well,
on
that's-
our
that is the thing, I
calendar,
mean.
did we decide, I know I saw
We're
that email.
toying with having a policy committee meeting before the March 5th.
March
Works,
5th,
because we don't need
okay.
to do finance.
Because then you would
Okay,
need to
good.
do.
Yes.
All right, great.
We
What
want that.
time
Awesome.
can everyone start?
What time can you start February 26th? 'Cause
Yeah,
that's-
Feb 26,
Amazing.
6:30?
Yeah, I mean,
In the morning?
I'm down
there's
with
that, Jody.
That will not be on the doodle poll.
6:30 would be the earliest. I'd actually
So 7?
rather do 7.
Okay.
Yeah, it's,
6:30 is the earliest you could get here?
yeah.
Right, I mean, we could do 7, and that way, even that's a little earlier than 7:30.
I'm trying to get here today, about a quarter to
That's why.
7.
Well, could
Yeah,
you get here at 6:30?
No, I got here about a quarter to 7 today.
So what time are, I'm sorry. I
7.
7 PM.
Zoned out,
No,
okay,
let's
thank
start-
you.
Why don't we get started?
All right, let's start at 6:30 and then you come.
All right,
Let's
so,
talk really slowly.
And it's
Could not
Hastings,
change it to
6:30 never means
Oh,
6:30.
okay, thank you, Doug.
Okay, so the
Janine.
policy meeting,
And we'll do policy February 5th.
and wait, Donna, can we just clarify, at this policy meeting, you guys were going to talk about hearings and what we should do regarding
If we need to
our-
have we're not even there yet, Lisa, basically, because as I mentioned at the last board meeting, we wanted to understand from Tony, have him talk with the different building administrators to see whether any of them feel the need to post anything on social media. If they don't, there's nothing to have a
Then we
hearing
don't
about.
need to- okay.
But at that policy committee meeting, we've gotten the second NISBA update, so we'll
Yes.
be going over those policies.
And then there was stuff that we needed to follow up from.
And there was
that, yeah.
follow-ups from previous meetings.
And that
yeah.
need to be.
Started at 6:30?
For the
The policy.
policy, March,
No, February 5th.
February, that's a work session, budget work session.
oh, wait, which thing are you asking?
Policy committee.
Was going to be on March 5th,
On
right?
February 5th.
February 5th. Oh,
Or do you want to do it March?
oh, you're right. Okay, we're in January right now. I apologize, yes.
we're going to do a public hearing on March 5th.
Well, we said that
Yeah,
that
but we're
timeline
not
was
doing
different.
that.
Oh,
Right, because we wanted policy to
Right.
figure
Yes.
out.
So can we do February 5th?
Yes, we can do February 5th.
Christine, does that work for you?
Yep, February 5th's good.
And Eileen, that works for you? Perfect. Okay.
We can move us along. Okay. So I think we are voting on the interim acceptable technology use policy. Is that right? Because it's a second read?
That is correct.
Okay.
I presented it last time, and I haven't heard from anybody that anyone had any issues with the language in it. So I think we're ready to vote and approve it.
So we're going to vote right now on the interim acceptable use policy that allows photos to be put on the district website if the parent has not filled out an opt-out form, and it does not allow posting of any photos by anyone on social media of children.
And it's not called an interim policy, just to be clear.
Right.
It is the policy until such time as we choose to change it.
Right, so we changed this in response to things that we became aware of in the fall, with the idea that let's put something in place. If we need to readdress it, we will, but this is where we're at now. Okay, so we're ready to vote. May I have a motion to approve the changes to 8630 acceptable technology uses?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Second public comment. Do we have any more comments?
Nina Siegel again.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was right there. I'm sorry. Any new business?
Start here.
Don't sit down yet, Nina. Okay. Okay, public comment.
No, I just wanted to publicly thank Dr. Sinanis for taking the time of doing such a thorough review and getting feedback on the new Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and to just lend a lens from the parent community that might be a little bit different from teachers and the board. And I don't think parents fret so much that we've had 3 or 4 curriculum directors over the last several years. All of us who relatively followed the administration closely have known that, forgive me for saying this, our prior superintendent appointed 3 of the last 4, and that doesn't go unnoticed to us. So we're actually very excited about your perspective and really want to give you a chance to make that happen. I think from my experience at UNICEF, where I run the coaching program, I really heard your note, Tony, that the issue of EQ and self-awareness being critical factors. And I think one of the challenges, frankly, is what's going to be when you talked about some of the resistance in the middle, and we find this with our leaders at UNICEF, is that the people who often need the help least seek it out the most. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that someone like Ross Abrams or Mary Green would sign up to be observed and have the coach, and they're, clearly leaders of excellence in the district. What might give me more pause is who wouldn't take advantage of the coaching, and to dig in a little bit as to why, because, and you all probably know this from your workplaces, good teachers and good staff members get autonomy and they invest in development. So I think we're lucky to have a lot of those teachers in the district, and the question is going to be, when it comes to that culture change, is the issue of resistance. And then my final point, Lisa, when you were talking about specialists and internal versus external, I think from an OD perspective that sometimes external consultants provide a little more safe space, so that teachers might feel a little more candid with a coach that might then not be one assessing them. So it might be really interesting to have someone long-term working with the director of curriculum. I think that kind of specialist at this point might help move things forward more quickly, and we're all really eager, and it may make sense to consider that external but more longer-term voice. So thanks.
Thank you, Nina. Any more public comments? Okay, any Board of Ed comments?
I have just one, which is to follow up on what Eileen said about the Finance Committee. I think at the moment, the only one of our committees that has such high attendance is the Finance Committee, but I think in general, while it may not be a legal requirement that we keep committees to less than a quorum, I think that if we start seeing attendance at a committee meeting be 4 or more, I think we should consider bringing it back and just having it be a committee of the whole and do it at a board meeting, because I think what starts to happen when you have 4 or 5 board members or 6 at a meeting, is it's hard to report out to the rest of the board because almost everyone was there already and the whole conversation is had. And I think in past years, when our committees only had 2 or 3 board members on them, the committee was sort of doing preliminary work and then presented a summary of what was said, and if more discussion was needed, the entire board was involved. And I think having so many board members at a committee, first of all, I think probably I'm guessing because I haven't been in those meetings, but I would think would slow down the committee accomplishing what it's trying to do, and then at the same time, in this particular case, it's kind of leaving me and Jody out, but in another case, it could be leaving 2 other people out. I just think that if that many people are interested in the topic, we should pull it back to the whole board, regardless of which committee it is. So that would be my suggestion.
I could speak to that. I'm not on the committee. However, I have been attending. As a new board member, I want to learn about, sort of the fiscal responsibility that I have as a trustee. I want to learn more about it. So that's really why I'm there.
I mean, there's no reason, I totally get that, Christina, but it kind of defeats the committee structure if almost everyone is there. In the 10 years I've been on the board, I've only been on the finance committee, I think 1 or 2 years. But I still, even the years I wasn't on it, I learned what was going on because there were much more meaty conversations I felt brought back to the whole board. So even if you weren't actually on the committee, you sort of heard what was going on. And I just think that it's pushing the entire conversation back to the committee to a degree. I'm not saying that you guys, what I'm saying is if the 2 of you are, or if the 5 of you are as interested as you are, then I think there should be a time and a place where all 7 of us could be hearing it, so it doesn't have to be 5 and then repeated for the other 2 of us. I think it's not.
I may have an answer to it, and I actually I think it's really great. I was on the board of Earth Justice for years, which is a national not-for-profit, and when we would have our weekend board meetings, we would all go to every committee meeting for the same reasons that Christina did. I mean, I wasn't on the investment committee, but I learned, and it was great, and it's wonderful to have this interest. I don't mind. I think that when we recount here, we're not just recounting for the board, but we're recounting for our in-person audience, for our external audience, that it's to educate our community as well. I don't have a problem doing it at a board meeting, except on account of time. And that's the thing. So we were in this meeting from 5:30 to 7:30. So if we waited and started till 7:30, we're going to be here till after 11 anyway. So I don't mind recounting everything, again, for everybody's education. The other thing would be sometimes we'd have to start early, but I know that that doesn't work.
Well, but it also doesn't work for everyone to be on every committee because people work and do other things. But I think
but it's not, like I said, Christina's not on it, but she attends because Stephanie did inform us, our attorneys did inform us, we can have as many board members as we want at committee meetings. That's completely legal.
I think we've already decided that we're going to have a work session, so I don't think it's an issue in this particular case. I'm just saying that going forward, I would be more comfortable that if whatever committee, whether it's the policy committee or any other committee, if we start to see that a lot of board members want to attend, that we talk to the rest of the board and see whether it's become a topic that needs to be brought back to the board as a whole.
Sure.
Because at this point, I can't go to finance committee meetings and policy committee meetings and arts advisory committee meetings and whatever other committee meetings I'm on. I don't have the time. But I feel uncomfortable with the fact that 5 board members are there having the conversation and I'm not hearing it. So I would just rather, if it gets to that critical mass, that we bring it back. And in this case, it's what we've decided to do. So I don't see a problem. I'm just saying that the next time it happens, I'd like us to handle it the same way. That's all.
I think as long as time permits and our availability permits, it's great. I think it's terrific if we can do that.
Well, if time doesn't permit and availability doesn't permit, then I would ask that just the people who are actually on the committee be talking in the committee meetings and the other people just be listening, and so that the conversation that involves everyone be back here.
I think I would leave. I'm mixed on that.
I realize you're mixed on it, Lisa, but I feel like it has worked very well for a very long time, and I'm just not comfortable with that much stuff happening outside of a full board meeting that involves such a large portion of the board. If people that aren't on a committee want to just sit and observe, to me that's one thing, but when it becomes a 5-way conversation and 2 of us aren't there, I think that's a completely different thing. That's my opinion.
So let's see how it plays out.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay, so next is an anticipated executive session. Can somebody make a motion to move into executive session to discuss a personnel matter relating to a particular person as well as collective negotiations?
So moved.
And a second? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, so with that,